Welcome to the Awesomers.com podcast. If you love to learn, and if you're motivated to expand your mind, and heck, if you desire to break through those traditional paradigms and find your own version of success, you are in the right place. Awesomers around the world are on a journey to improve their lives and the lives of those around them. We believe in paying it forward, and we fundamentally try to live up to the great Zig Ziglar quote, where he said, "You can have everything in your life you want if you help enough other people get what they want." It doesn't matter where you came from, it only matters where you're going. My name is Steve Simonson, and I hope you will join me on this awesomer journey.
If you're launching a new product manufactured in China, you will need professional, high-resolution, Amazon-ready photographs. Because Simo Global has a team of professionals in China, you will oftentimes receive your listings photographs before your product even leaves the country. This streamlined process will save you the time, money, and energy needed to concentrate on marketing and other creative content strategies before your item is in stock and ready for sale. Visit simoglobal.com to learn more, because a picture should be worth 1,000 keywords.
This is episode 3 of the Awesomers podcast. You can find show details and show notes by going to awesomers.com/3. That's awesomers.com/3 to find the appropriate show links, notes, and details that we discuss throughout the program. Today, our special guest is Paul Rafelson, who is a tax attorney representing online merchants in tax and other business matters. And prior to advising online merchants, Paul spent over 12 years defending Fortune 100 companies in complex state tax litigation matters, spending most of his career as in-house counsel for the likes of Microsoft, Walmart, GE, that's General Electric, everybody. Paul's also an adjunct professor at the Pace Law School, where he teaches a state tax-based constitutional law course, and he is the acting executive director of a new trade association for online merchants called the Online Merchants Guild. And in my opinion, the Online Merchants Guild is a great new resource that will help each of us find legal advocacy and legal strategies, as well as lobbying through the association, and where we can combine our efforts. Can work really, really well, and I'm super excited about it. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend. It doesn't hurt to leave a review as well. We really appreciate you guys sharing and getting the word out about the Awesomers podcast. Thank you very much. Welcome back, Awesomers. Steve Simonson coming to you again, and today I have a very special guest, Paul Rafelson, and he is a well-known expert in the field of not particularly sales tax and tax law, but has been a legal guy for many, many years. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, thanks so much. Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Certainly my pleasure. And Paul and I are meeting just after the Supreme Court has made a decision regarding the 1992 Quill versus North Dakota decision. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But Paul, kind of tell me about your business today, what you're doing, and where you live.
Sure. So, so let's start with the easy question. Where do I live? I live in the New York Metro. I live in the beautiful Connecticut suburbs of New York City, and very quaint little area. I moved here from Arkansas, believe it or not, after living in Seattle as part of my tour of huge companies where I was in-house tax counsel at Microsoft in Seattle and Walmart. I was in Arkansas, and then this company called General Electric moved me to
fella.
Connecticut, yeah. And I don't know how much you know about GE, and they're paying zero taxes, but they're sort of like the New York Yankees of tax. So when they want you to come, you kind of have to. I felt like I was being called up to the majors, So I had to go. But I grew up, not too far from here. I grew up in New Jersey, so I was kind of happy to be back in the area. And then, GE. One of the last things I was doing at GE is helping them move to Boston. So kind of negotiating the same incentives that Amazon is negotiating now in its HQ2. GE was the original HQ2, I guess, in a way, and was a big deal up until the Amazon one. So I was working on that, but I myself chose not to go to Boston. I really like where I live, and I really like it here. And being in the New York Metro, I stayed. So that's that. My business, well, I wear two hats. The first hat I wear is I'll go through this part first, is I volunteer as the executive director of Online Merchants Guild, or OMG. We are a trade association of online sellers, online merchants, but we have to convert you from saying sellers to merchants, but who sell online. It can be Amazon, it can be eBay, Shopify. A lot of times our merchants are across multiple platforms. So And what we do is we represent your interests in, shaping the future of e-commerce law and policy. So, what I've been saying lately is, do you remember Mark Zuckerberg when he was on Capitol Hill? Did you watch
Of
them?
course, yeah. Especially the parody versions where they lip synced him. But yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. And you saw the questions that he was being asked by the Congress. I mean, really gave you a sense of confidence that these people really understand how things work in digital anything, right? I mean, it's
yeah. Just for the benefit of the audience, the questions were so. I would just say low level, and they showed essentially the ignorance of the people asking the questions. The guy is questioning the witness, if you will. We're asking questions like, how are you going to make money? And he's like, we sell ads. Yeah, but it's free. How are you going to make money? And it's like the company's multi-billion-dollar profits. They just showed absolute ignorance, in my opinion, and it's just crazy.
No, that's exactly right. And I'm starting to see that as an epidemic in everything e-commerce, even this court case, which we're going to talk about a little later. But yeah, I mean, that's the point. I mean, we have this Online Merchants Guild to basically say, listen, people are going to lobby, people are going to push policies, they're going to push agendas, and they're going to push it upon people who have no idea. And so our organization needs to exist because we need to give online merchants a voice. We need to get behind candidates that actually understand who we are and can push push for the right laws that, are appropriate for helping our industry grow. So that's that's what we do. The other side of it is, just like any trade association would do, we're ready to take legal action. I mean, we want to sue California. We want to sue Washington to assert your constitutional rights, because you have constitutional rights. Even if you're in another country, you still have constitutional rights as applied to your sales in this country. And but that's expensive. And so when I have clients personally who are being chased down by California, one of the first things I tell them is, this isn't one of those things where it's, either the sales tax service provider or the lawyer. The problem with the lawyer is they're going to tell you not to use the sales tax service provider and shove you down the road of litigation. I mean, the first thing I tell my clients, you can't afford to litigate. I litigated these cases, for Microsoft and all the, it's $1 million litigation budget sometimes. And you can't afford it, and nor should one seller really afford it, because the case at the end of the day, it's the same case for everyone. So it should be litigated by an organization of common interest, and that's pretty normal. I mean, when the beverage companies, when Chicago passed the sugar tax on sodas, all the beverage manufacturers got together and fought it. They took, they hired a law firm and they fought it, and that's what we want to do. We want to hire the right law firm, work with the right lawyers, and get our voice heard in court. Suing the states, seeking declaratory relief, which is like an injunction, basically saying stop pursuing the seller. So that's the Online Merchants Guild. So we need people to join. The membership sort of varies by your size. Everything's recommended. So, we have there's one membership tier. I think they decided to put for $25,000. Nobody's actually done it. And it's like if you're in the 100 million plus range of a seller. But, we're not going to sit here and audit your sales. It's all suggested. It's, we kind of figure if you have that much at stake, then you should be comfortable contributing this, because you're going to gain so much from what we're trying to do for you. We're going to fight a lawsuit for you that's going to save you a lot of money. But at the end of the day, if you give $100 and that's your membership level, that's fine. I mean, that's what you do. It's all suggested. And, in addition to sort of fighting for tax policy, IP policy, trade policy, all the things that we want to be there for to sort of shape government and the future of e-commerce law, we also want to focus on benefits. We're thinking about, having insurance products being offered to our members, things that they need, getting, special discounts with vendors that are, appropriate for our community, right? It's sort of like the AAA or ARP benefits, except instead of getting 10% off of a cellular phone, you're getting 10% off of something that actually is relevant to your business online. And so that's kind of what our benefits focus is. And that's all building. We're still very, very much in our infancy. We did file an Amicus Brief in this case, which you can find on the Supreme Court website and read. I wrote it. I think we can talk about its influence later. And then from a personal side, I have I'm a law practice. I have a couple lawyers that I work with, and we focus on, obviously, tax is a big issue. People contact me all the time who are being contacted by states, don't know what to do. people who are worried about, are they, what to do if a state contacts them, or whether they should register for tax in certain states. We have, I have an IP lawyer who's, formerly senior IP counsel at Microsoft, who helps tons of merchants with patents and trademarks and patents as well. And then I have, mergers and acquisitions experts that came off of multi-billion-dollar deals and certainly know how to make sure that you don't leave money on the table when negotiating the sale of your Amazon business, which I see a lot. Maybe it's, the difference between an asset sale and a stock sale, and the person who's driving the deal might tell you an asset sale is better for you, but depending on how you're structured, it might actually be a stock, it might be better to do a stock sale, things like that. We run that analysis for you. We have experts who do that for you. If you pay tax, we can help you recover what you paid if it wasn't appropriate. So, that's my law practice. So people can certainly reach out to me at paul@rafelsonlaw.com if they have those questions. paul@onlinemerchantsguild.org if they have those questions, and certainly go to onlinemerchantsguild.org to join and help us fight that fight.
So, and just for your benefit, Paul, and the audience already knows, we're going to have these links in the show notes and make sure that we get the loose ends tied up there. Definitely the concept of the Online Merchants Guild, very, very important, especially when you consider we all kind of have this common problem, right? There are thousands of people being harassed, and I'm not putting words in Paul's mouth. Everybody should be clear that my own opinions are my own opinions. Paul has got his own opinions.
I'm disagreeing with anything you've said so far.
Yeah, I think California is operating in a full-scale harassment, almost mafia-like mode of scaring people with these letters, and it's happening every day. Do you see that happening continuously?
Oh my God, people email me. I've had merchants threatened with jail time. I don't know if you knew about the letter. When California was first reaching out to people, I'd written a letter to the state, to the governor.
I saw that. Yes, it's a beautiful letter.
I told members, I said, listen, guys, if you got the letter from California and you feel like you need to respond, send my letter. Every auditor has to explain to you under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights the basis for the information that they need. They have to say this information is needed to do X, Y, Z. And so we asked them to explain why they needed it under the, raising the point that we're not even really the retailer under California law, and I stand by all of that still. And the funny thing was, we got this letter back. They sent it to all these, all the merchants who sent my letter out, and it was in Word. And inadvertently, somebody from California forgot to scrub the document, and it turned out that Amazon data was inside of the Word document. And so basically what it meant was that Amazon wrote this legal response that would eventually become a California legal ruling, and somebody from California copied it from an Amazon document and pasted it into the official California legal doc. And I can send it to you. It's hilarious. I mean, they sent it to me.
Wow. I definitely love to see it. So just to break it down for the audience, you're saying ultimately the California response was written by Amazon.
Yes, it was.
See, this is one of those things that we just have to, this is why, the Online Merchants Guild is a great way to kind of have everybody show solidarity, because whatever you can put in, and we should put in what we need to put in, because we've got to hold people accountable. Amazon on one hand is saying, come onto our marketplace, be responsible for taxes. By the way, you have no access to the customer. We don't know where your inventory is. You can't control anything, but you're responsible somehow. And we're going to keep that in place because we have more power than you do at the state level. And to me, it's a giant surprise to see that Amazon themselves is, not only did they not file I call it an amicus brief, but you had a different pronunciation.
Amicus. I think it's because I was a Latin student. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So either way, an amicus brief or amicus brief is where, friend of the court says, hey, this is the way we see it. And Paul wrote a beautiful, beautiful brief that anybody should read just to understand, kind of our perspective. He puts in the legalese. I think even eBay wrote one to say, hey, this is not right, what's happening. Amazon's silent on the issue. And it's a real shame that Amazon's helping write, kind of legal responses for states to come after guys.
Especially when there's a direct conflict of interest, because obviously our point of view is that Amazon's on the hook, right? And that if you want your $1 billion of lost taxes, you better go after Amazon. And there's plenty of evidence to support that in California, as well as the law as written, right? Especially when you consider an FBA transaction where, you talk about the definition of a sale as transfer of title or possession, or both, title, possession, or both. I mean, that's Amazon in an FBA context. Plus, a lot of states, California, Massachusetts come to mind, have this discretion clause that says, if it makes more sense to have the sales tax administered this way, a certain way, then the commissioner or director of the state tax division has the discretion to do so. They could say, hey, listen, California could say, hey, listen, Amazon, we want you to collect the sales tax now because it doesn't make sense for us to have to go after 1 million sellers if that's what they believe, right? And all of that exists, but Amazon's lobbying power, the 30,000 jobs they have in California, the jobs they're throwing into Massachusetts. I mean, I know what Massachusetts is like when you're throwing jobs in. Like I said, I helped GE move to Boston. They're a lot nicer to you when you're bringing stuff into Boston. So it's all led to this, sort of us versus them, and them being the states and Amazon working together to, because the states sign these deals as well. They sign deals saying, hey, we're going to collect tax from Amazon, or Amazon's going to collect tax, but not on their marketplace. We're going to actually sign a document saying not on their marketplace, and to make sure Amazon has a price advantage. I mean, it gets really conspiracy theory-ish after a while, but the merchants I speak to get it because they're living it and they understand it. So to them, it doesn't sound conspiracy theory-ish, but to outsiders, it does sound a little weird because you're trying to explain the difference between, what's a tax break? A tax break, from a sales tax perspective, is a lot different than a tax break from a property tax. So, if I put a warehouse in Worcester, Mass, right, where, there's not so great areas of Worcester, although, it's getting better, whatever. If I put a warehouse in Worcester, Mass, and the state gives me a 20-year property tax abatement, I don't disagree with that. I think that's,
Sure.
It's a fair trade. I mean, you're trying to build up an area, you're trying to breathe some life into it. If you didn't do it, you wouldn't get the property tax anyway because the land isn't worth very much. So why not? But when you actually sign a document and you give somebody a sales tax competitive advantage, in other words, you're saying you don't have to collect sales tax, that's not a tax advantage. That's a price break. That's a price advantage. That's picking a winner, right? You're basically saying we're going to let you, because you put jobs and you put warehouses in our state, we're going to let you sell cheaper than anybody else in our state can sell. And so when states complain about the level playing field, and they complain that it's, that they're sick and tired of losing money to online retailers, but the number one source of the problem, they enabled it. They could have not signed those agreements. And those agreements are probably not even enforceable because they're probably illegal. But the point is, they have the ability to either change the law, as Washington and Pennsylvania did, to instantly level the playing field, or to just enforce the law like South Carolina is doing. But these states, that they didn't need the Supreme Court. Washington and Pennsylvania didn't need the Supreme Court to fix the problem, but yet that's what happened.
Catalyst 88 was developed to help entrepreneurs achieve their short and long-term goals in e-commerce markets by utilizing the power of shared entrepreneurial wisdom. Entrepreneurship is nothing if not lessons to be learned. Learn from others. Learn from us. I guarantee that we will learn from you. Visit catalyst88.com because your success is our success. Giddy up.
Boy, I love every part of that rant, by the way, because, and I've said as much, although probably not as cohesively, but the reality from my perspective is that, Washington and Pennsylvania with just a single stroke of a pen said, hey, this is the marketplace problem now. And by the way, that makes all the sense in the world. One of the core questions before we dive into the Quill decision, one of the core questions I always have wondered is, besides the obvious of the price advantage, and the fact that, now, it's been, even before the Quill overturn, there was most of these states are chasing sellers. Amazon must know that the sellers are being harassed and harangued. Why do they continue with this policy? My big picture reasoning was that they don't want the product liability. They don't want the kind of the end consumer liability, which would even be more than sales tax potentially. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's just the price advantage? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the price advantage is definitely key. I mean, I know a lot of insiders at Amazon. There are a lot of ex-Microsoft people at Amazon right now, and Amazon has never been shy about, their goal, from the last 10 years has always been to delay sales tax, because, Bezos himself has admitted the benefit of, having tax-free shopping. It's a huge draw. And I always look to products like the MacBook. I don't know, MacBook is always my quintessential example because they're really expensive. And so, I may not be tax motivated when buying, a pack of Staples, not that I buy Staples that often, But when I'm buying a MacBook, I am thinking, do I go to B&H here in New York and buy it tax-free? Do I go to Amazon and buy it tax-free? And you'll notice if you go on Amazon, they're not an authorized Apple reseller. They're not going to sell you a MacBook directly. It's going to be through a third party, and you're not going to pay sales tax, right? So when Jet.com became an Apple seller, it was funny to me, and people were saying, well, why isn't Amazon? You're right. Why isn't Amazon? They're the world's largest retailer. Why wouldn't they be an Apple seller? It's because they don't want to be. It's because that's going to kill their brand. They want people to think MacBook, let's go to Amazon and get it tax-free. So that advantage is really important to them, and it's important still. There's definitely a percentage of sales that they retain, and because of that, it may not be as much as it used to be, because with Prime, the loyalty is different, right? What we've noticed as sellers with Prime is that people now will actually pay more for products that have a Prime logo on it than they would if they just went down the street, or even on Amazon if it was cheaper to buy it from a non-Prime person. It's a really odd phenomenon. People are noticing that they can really hike up their prices compared to what they buy things at, Walmart and in the arbitrage space. And as long as there's a Prime logo on it, people will buy it. So we're seeing less of that price sensitivity, but it still exists today. And there's certainly a good percentage that does. And in retail, every percent is huge, right? I mean, the margins are so thin. So, even if it's like 8%, which is what I think Jet.com reported roughly when they started collecting tax on everything, that's still a substantial amount of lost sales to a company like Amazon. So they're not about to let go of that competitive advantage. As far as the product liability thing, it's a really timely point. I think that on the one hand, I would say there's no escaping product liability in those situations, because we have this sort of concept of strict liability. But that said, Amazon actually won a case in Tennessee where the court said that Amazon was just like Craigslist, basically. I'm sure that case won't survive an appeal if it ever gets that far, as the judge's reasoning was completely garbage. But it's funny you mention it, because that's, to me, like, the fact that Amazon can escape strict liability is hilarious. And the reason why they were going after Amazon was because the seller disappeared. It was probably a seller from China, I think. And so they had no other recourse but to recover from Amazon. But, in the world of tax, our definitions are very specific. And so definitions that make you a retailer for tax purposes may not make you a retailer for other purposes under the law, for such as in the context of who's the seller for product liability purposes, uniform commercial code. It's all going to be different. Tax has its own sort of ecosystem of definitions. Like, a perfect example is like, what's a person? Under the Internal Revenue Code, a corporation is a person, right? I mean, so it doesn't really seem to make sense, but for tax purposes, it's a person. That's how we view it. So interesting point. And one last thing before. Just something to circle back on about Washington. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been noticing this, and I've said it before, but people don't seem to realize it. Even though Washington State is collecting your sales tax, they still assert that they still believe you owe a B&O tax, which is the business and occupation tax. It's their sort of quasi income tax, because it's illegal it's unconstitutional to have an income tax in Washington right now. Isn't it unconstitutional? I can't remember. I know they tried. I know Bill Gates Sr. tried to impose one, but it never happened. So anyway, the B&O tax is a small percentage of your sales. I don't remember if it's like 0.02% or something like that on your retail sales, because they consider you a retailer, that you have to pay, not collect, to the state of Washington. And in order to do that, you have to fill out what is essentially the Washington State sales tax return, as you would have to fill out normally if you were collecting Washington State sales tax. And then what you're supposed to do is apply a credit. So you basically take a credit on the form for all the taxes Amazon collected for the sales tax piece, but then still have to pay the B&O piece. So in terms of, tax liability, yes, Washington has taken steps to kind of prevent you from having this accumulated tax liability every month that they believe you owe. I don't believe you owe. They do. But at the same time, the burden is still there. They haven't alleviated you of the burden, which is really what we care about when we get into the case.
It is the burden, yeah. For everybody listening, this is actually an important point to make. So a lot of people, especially the people who don't know what they're talking about, they will say, "Hey, Steve, you are harping on this sales tax thing, and really it's just you trying not to pay tax." And it's like, no, that's not it. Really, I don't pay the tax anyway. As a merchant, I collect the tax and remit the tax. That would be a simple thing and relatively closed-ended. But as Paul alluded to, It's the other things, the income tax, the B&O tax. Cities will start sending out, in my opinion, registration notices and go, hey, you sold something in Seattle and it's a $50 a year registration. Welcome to the party. And in some cases, there's even little revenue tax overrides, and counties have, asset taxes and so on and so forth. This is, it will be death by a thousand cuts for regulatory paperwork, not just the cost of it all.
Absolutely. The cost, I mean, you're right. The registration fee is, something that I don't stress enough. We're in California, just to register your LLC, I think it's, is it $800 a year?
$800 or something, maybe more now.
Oh. $300, same thing. You have to file for your LLC. You have to file personal income tax return now in all these states. It adds up. But then, the registration fees that you have to pay the annual to the state secretary of state, all that stuff you have to do, it adds up so that, you can be creeping into six figures easily based on where Amazon is now, and as they expand out their network even more, as states assert crazy Nexus theories, which we'll get into later. But it's a crazy sense of, it's a crazy situation. I agree. No seller, and this is why I had a problem with eBay's position. eBay had a petition, and I was very cautious to say, from an OMG perspective, we don't support this. Is that we do support tax. That's a misconception. We don't benefit individually from the no tax situation. Amazon benefits collectively, right? I mean, people seem to think we benefit, but if you look to the person who benefits the most, it's Amazon. And so we support tax. We just support it. We just want it to be easy. Make it easy. Either have Amazon collect it or leverage the technology that makes it so easy and painless that, it's not a problem. Like if you want to have an income tax burden, then, maybe you have a gross receipts tax on Amazon sellers, and then those who and give us the option to file our own income tax instead. So that way we can either live with the gross receipts tax based on, data pulled out of an Amazon API, or we file an income tax return and substitute it for that. I mean, there's ways the states could do this to make it easy. They're just totally, again, we've got the Zuckerberg level people in charge, and they're also, it's impossible for them to cooperate with each other. And I'll give you a quick example of the Zuckerberg level as it applies to our community. Richard Cram is the genius who sort of facilitated the amnesty program that was launched back in August, where states falsely accused everybody of tax evasion, but then, thankfully they forgave us.
Good news. Yeah. Thanks, Robin Hood.
Yeah, exactly. But they didn't tell you about all the back taxes you'd still owe with respect to income and all the other problems you'd have. But anyway, so when I reached out to Richard very shortly after the thing was launched, sort of a little bit naive at the time, just thinking, okay, this is a case of states really not understanding how Amazon works. I used to be a seller. Coincidentally, my wife used to be in seller operations many years ago. So I had like this double whammy of actually knowing a lot about what it's like to be an Amazon seller from the inside and from the outside. And so, because she was at Amazon, and that's how I got involved, is through one of her former colleagues. But yeah, so when I reached out to Richard and I started explaining things to him, I said, Richard, what about commingling? I said, those who commingle their inventory. I said, it's almost like the second I send my inventory out to UPS or whomever, I cease ownership at that point, because that very physical product, that serial number, if you will, no longer is guaranteed to go to the person who clicks on my price, right? It could come from a completely different place. So really, I don't own anything tangible at that moment. I have like an IOU from Amazon, like some sort of intangible right that if somebody clicks on my price, Amazon will meet its obligation and give them the thing that I gave them. But I'm not storing anything in any one place. And you know what he said to me?
Tell me.
What's commingling?
Oh, yes.
And that's who's making this decision. That's who's driving e-commerce, right? I mean, so that's, again, it's just another example of, having the wrong people in charge. And it's like we have this government of people that have no idea how the modern economy works, and they're just going to screw it up. Pardon my language.
No, that's frankly, there could be much stronger language deployed here. It is such a multitude of levels of kind of, on the plus side or the nice side, unawareness, or down to pure ignorance. And the issue for us as online sellers or merchants, the OMG Online Merchants Guild types of guys, we have to really think about, how do we deal with this level of ignorance, right? Because you can't fight City Hall and win, certainly not on your own. And to get big things overturned, it really does make more sense to kind of join together and take it to the man, so to speak.
Absolutely. I think we're going to make a bigger push to get people, now that we know the outcome of this Wayfair case, now that we know what needs to happen. We're going to make a big push, because the reality is like you said, nobody can do it by themselves. People need to join. People really need to get involved now. It's sort of now or never time if they want to have a voice. I don't think people realize, like, there's 2 million sellers online at least. Now, I don't realistically think we're going to get anywhere close to 2 million sellers, but even if we captured, I don't know, 50,000 or even 20,000, God knows, who knows, we'd be pretty powerful. But, it's the numbers that make us powerful. It's the number of sellers out there that makes us powerful. If you think about one of the most powerful lobbies in the United States is the American Association of Retired People, or AARP. It's just a sheer numbers thing. There's just a lot of older people in the United States who qualify to be members, and they pay their dues and they get their discounts, and that gives the AARP a strong voice in what's important to them. And so there's no reason we as sellers can't have a strong voice and can't actually not only influence legislation, but we can influence Amazon too. I mean, there's leverage points to be had. If we have strong political influence, then we can start pushing back on things that Amazon does that makes it harder for us. Because to your point earlier, yes, Amazon knows that there's sellers that are struggling because of this, but there's a lot of other things that are happening that are causing Amazon sellers to struggle, right? I mean, the new FBA fees structure is killing a lot of people. The IP, the constant, fake law firm from China sends a false infringement claim to Amazon. Amazon shuts you down. You're down for 2 weeks. You're losing tons of money. Meanwhile, had Amazon just checked the register.com, address, realized that this was a law firm that was just established yesterday, probably not legitimate, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And, fake reviews. I mean, it's like, I understand that there's some of it's real, but there's some that people are just getting caught up in it. It's like, it's a big fishing expedition for Amazon in some cases, and they just don't know what's going on. And then to get your issue resolved is taking so long because they're just overwhelmed. So, there's things that Amazon does that we definitely have the ability to push back on, but only as a powerful organization. But the only way we become that is if people join.
Well, this is a foundational element, and we'll talk maybe offline about the Empower e-commerce cooperative, a nonprofit member-owned cooperative that has kind of worked on the benefit side of that equation more than the legal and the lobbying side. But the reality is these concepts are all about people being better together. And I was at Amazon, I don't know, a year or two ago, and we had this discussion about, we understand there's a bunch of these bad fish that are in the waters. These guys who, the sellers who are making fake reviews and the sellers who are making fake complaints and manipulating, other guys. There's a lot of those bad guys in the ecosystem. And, on one hand, we want Amazon to take those guys out of the ocean, but not take us out with them. And I kept saying, we're the dolphins. Quit taking the dolphins out with the nets. You're killing us. And it's a continuous process. While I respect the complexity of it and understand that, sometimes it's probably hard to tell the difference between good and bad, some of their algorithmic methods of finding out who's manipulating reviews, I think, are creating a massive amount of false positives.
Absolutely.
People who I know for a fact have never engaged in any kind of tomfoolery or skullduggery, and they're being treated just like they are one of the worst guys on the planet.
Absolutely.
And I just, at the end of the day, my maybe it's wishful thinking, but I want to believe that Amazon wants what's best for the sellers, and that they really want the merchants at the end of the day to feel like they're some level of customer instead of the outcasts that we are today.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of, people are very pessimistic right now about their Amazon businesses. They feel as if, almost like, is Amazon trying to thin the herd a little bit now by kind of like making sure, are they trying to clear out their warehouses? Are they just full of too much stuff? I mean, we don't know what's going on in the big picture, but there's a lot of pessimism I've noticed in the marketplace, and a lot of people I speak to, beyond just the tax issue. And it seems like tax is just another one of those factors that just kind of is causing people to think twice about becoming an Amazon business, which is a shame because, listen, Amazon at the end of the day, what Prime is, and I have plenty of reservations about whether, it's appropriate for Amazon to control the whole Prime delivery system because of how it was built, but I'll save that for another time. But at the end of the day, what it is a portal to the global economy. It's it's instant scale, right? I mean, if in 1992, when the original Quill decision happened, right, you wanted to sell a product and sell internationally and have a global product sold, you'd have to have like so much money, right? I mean, tens of millions. I don't know how much it would cost in 1992 dollars, but you have to set up warehouses in all these countries and all of that.
Distribution. Yeah. Every piece of the puzzle had to be solved by you individually, right?
Yeah, and if you wanted to sell products nationally, or you could go to Walmart and be in the pitch room, which I used to walk by all the time. It's very, very odd to watch people pitch,
Pitching
and
for their
hope to God
lives.
that Walmart would do that and then squeeze you out of your profits. It's not unlike the way some people are being treated now. But the point is that with Amazon and Prime, eBay really started it, right? I mean, you now have the ability to sell on a national and international platform. But what Amazon did was they introduced the logistics. And so now you have the ability to sell and scale at the same level, in fact, better than Walmart, better than Target, right? Because you have the best logistics system in the world at your disposal to get your product out there. And so that's really cool. So I always say, like, Amazon created this portal to the global economy where, for just a few bucks, you can go from being like, to selling in competition with those, giant big box retailers. It's amazing. That's revolutionary.
It truly is. And this, as much as we want to improve things and critique things, the reality is, it's still a wonderful opportunity. And, some guy and his cat can be running a global business. It's got more complex, and we're going to dive now into why it's getting more complex, but it's still an opportunity. There's a lot of very positive things about e-commerce in general, and certainly the Amazon piece.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a good product these days, if you're, or if you're really good at what you do, people still succeed. I think, I think there's some older business models that worked back in the day, and people made a lot of money, but they were just kind of like, not working today. But I think, those who are innovative, those who have great ideas, and really kind of understand, there's still plenty of success to be had. I mean, if you design, the majority of your listeners, are they? Would you put them in any one bucket in terms of the type of seller? Are they wholesale? Are they private label? Are they, are they kind of a mix?
There's definitely a mix, but most of what I advocate and what I believe in is building your own brand, which, most people would refer to as private label or whatever. But I like to see people build brands, which builds equity, which means that you have something at the end of the day that's worth something.
Good. I didn't want to come in and say, like, start saying, other things were the way to go, and then find out that your whole, audience is pure, like drop ship, and be like, so no, that's good, because I agree with you. Brand building is the most profitable way to be profitable, because it's still your own brand. Like, you've created something, and if it's unique, if it's novel, if it's something that people want, sometimes it doesn't even have to be that unique. Sometimes it's just like, one change to a product that, somebody else made, or somebody else sourced from a different factory, making that one change. Maybe it's making the cable longer. I don't know. I've heard stories, but we're just focusing on a very niche product, like, I don't know.
A better spatula.
Better spatula, exactly. Right. Like your own better spatula. I always tell people, like, people who are in the industry, is like, if you're in, sales of plumbing supplies and fixtures, I said, I bet you could come up with some cool stuff and sell it on Amazon, because your trade so well that you could probably mimic what the good things that your suppliers do, and remove the bad and sell it cheaper. And I bet you make a lot of money, because I think that's always key, to look to kind of, where did you come from? What do you know? And
That's a pressing example, because I talk to guys in that space, the plumbing and construction space, saying exactly the same thing, which is, bring a cool idea forward and make it B2C friendly. So, all right, let's back up for a minute and frame up this problem with the Quill decision. And so we'll first talk maybe about, what was the original Quill thought. You could probably summarize it pretty easily. And then what did the court just undo, basically? Can you help us with that?
Sure. So Quill is a continuation of a case called Bellis Hess, which was a 1967 case, and was the origination of the concept that a business must have a physical presence in the state in order for the state to subject it to tax, is the expression we use. Technically, you're collecting sales tax, but to be subject to the tax jurisdiction, if you will, of a state, you had to have a physical presence of some kind in that state. And that case went up in 1992 in Quill, because we had another case called Complete Auto Transit versus Brady, which basically came up with this much more sort of gray conceptual concept of, whether state tax is constitutional, but no bright line rule such as physical presence. And the question in Quill was, does the complete auto gray area rule overrule the Bellis-Hess physical presence bright line test? And the court in Quill was probably leaning towards yes, it does, but it was actually the states that kind of shot themselves in the foot in that case by sort of indicating that they may try to apply this court's decision retroactively, and that they just kind of sensed the fear that the states, if left to their own devices, could really do a lot of harm to, which was the catalog industry. Quill was an office supply company, now part of Staples, and so they were worried about the catalog industry, which is kind of funny because of the way this case went out. You're worried about the catalog industry, but not 2 million people selling online. But yeah, so that was the thing. And so when when the states got a whiff of when this court got a whiff of what the states kind of were trying to do, or what could possibly be done, I think they felt better err on the side of caution and just create the physical presence bright line rule, but make it clear to Congress that when they make a decision under what we call the Dormant Commerce Clause, which is basically saying when Congress hasn't addressed a situation, we basically need to come in and basically act as if we're Congress and sort of resolve it, in a manner that we think would be consistent with Congress's intent, but could always be Congress could always override it by actually addressing it directly. So we call that sort of the Dormant Commerce Clause, because you're sort of, creating, law out of nothing, sort of. Basically, I'm not going to get into the whole negative preemption thing because that's just going to drive people nuts. But you're basically kind of, invoking the Commerce Clause at the bench as opposed to in Congress, because the issue is important and needs to be addressed. The court passes the bright line rule of physical presence in 1992, and lo and behold, 20 years later, less than that, a few years later, we start to see the internet and e-commerce, and throughout the last 20 years or so, states have really been struggling with taxing e-commerce because of this physical presence rule, which they deem to be archaic and old and inappropriate in the modern era. And so what they started to do was, to start to tap away at it. We saw it mostly in income tax, actually. The first chip at physical presence was in a case in 1992 called Jeffrey. It was actually a South Carolina case. Where there was an intangible company that didn't actually have any physical presence in the state of South Carolina called Jeffrey, which represents Jeffrey the giraffe from Toys R Us, and they would charge a royalty, a fee for using the giraffe to the local stores. So basically, if the South Carolina store made $100, they would still have to pay $50 to the giraffe company in Delaware. And what that meant was the giraffe company would now have $50 of income in Delaware, where they don't tax that type of income. And the South Carolina company now, instead of having $100 of income, only has $50 of income. So it's all like gaming within the company and sort of taking advantage of the way states' income tax structures were back then. And South Carolina said, no, wait a minute. Jeffrey has an economic nexus in the state of South Carolina because they're deriving income related to, the activity, and so they kind of coined this economic nexus concept back in 1992, and they won. I mean, the court wasn't going to touch that, and then we started to see more and more of these economic nexus cases, Capital One, MBNA, where the credit card debt basically and the presence of the cards created nexus. And eventually we saw the New York case against Amazon, which was what we call the click-through or affiliate nexus cases, right? Where, now the states were saying, and this was really the first crack at a sales tax case because those were all income taxes, but we've been sort of seeing physical presence get withered away. And so that's when New York kind of went to say, well, you have this affiliates operating in the state of New York. They're referring sales back to Amazon and collecting commission. They're like your affiliates. We have case law at the Supreme Court that says, when you have affiliates operating in the state, then they're basically can create nexus, what we call affiliate nexus. And so New York won this groundbreaking case that basically started the road, paved the way for states to sort of impose their tax laws against Amazon without sort of the traditional sense of physical presence that we thought about, that we know. And so, and the other thing about withering away at physical presence, for those who just really want to know, this is probably more detail than you need. The one thing about that always was interesting about the income tax cases is that the states sort of just took this idea that something that was said in the Quill case that basically said physical presence was only a requirement for in sales tax, not income tax. So that's why they started with the income tax cases and then kind of moved towards the sales tax cases. So that's sort of the history of how we got there. But now, still feeling like for whatever reason, they decided, rather than continuing down the road of affiliate Nexus with Wayfair, which they totally could have done and probably would have won, because the court never ever took or overturned any attempt by state to use this economic nexus theory. They chose to sort of pass these, unconstitutional laws, such as the 200 transaction, $100,000 of sales rules, in the hope, in order to drive a challenge to the court. And that was because, God, sorry, the history of this is just so much.
No sorries. This is important for people to understand context, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is a 2015 case called Direct Marketing v. Broll. And in that case, it had to do with Colorado tax disclosure, and whether that case could be brought into federal court, because typically federal courts are not allowed to hear tax cases. But it really wasn't about a tax or the administration of a tax. It was about notice. And so the court, so that was the issue there. And the court saw it that way, that it wasn't really about the notice. It wasn't the tax.
Yeah.
But in that decision, what was important was you had Justice Kennedy, who delivered the opinion in this case, inviting the states to bring a case against Quill. And that DMA case, before it was at the Supreme Court, was actually heard by Gorsuch, who eventually became the judge in the Supreme Court and also sided with the majority in this case. But Kennedy was sort of said in his concurring opinion in DMA that, hey, we need somebody to bring a case. This physical presence rule is just stupid and needs to go. Those are my words, not his.
Of course. Yeah. And is it considered a normal thing for these justices to kind of telegraph their opinions? There's a couple written statements and written opinions that were very blatant, saying, hey, and maybe in today's modern world, it doesn't apply anymore.
Empower. The name says it all. Connecting e-commerce entrepreneurs with great people, ideas, systems, and the services needed to stay business dynamic and to grow. Empowery is a network, a cooperative venture of tools and resources to make you better at what you do, because we love what you do. We are you. Visit empowery.com to learn more.
I've never, it's the nature of the Dormant Commerce Clause. I mean, it's basically the Supreme Court trying to figure out the right answer in the absence of congressional legislation. So they have more leeway to be critical of those types of things. I mean, there is a concept of stare decisis, but there's also the concept of, listen, we're just trying to come up with an answer in lieu of, this really should be Congress's problem, not our problem. But because it's our problem, we're just trying to come up with the right answer. The answer we chose, we now see as being pretty dumb in the modern economy. And I think the court in this case, and we'll get into a little bit more, was pissed off at Wayfair. I think there was probably an intent for what physical presence was meant to do, but it was never meant to shelter a giant company like Wayfair from collecting sales tax, especially with their massive virtual presence and all that. So I think from the court's perspective, this case is really about preventing companies like Wayfair from an overstock from sort of using this as a shelter to gain a price advantage, but limited in many ways to that, situation, and still being open to other scenarios where, it still could be unconstitutional. But what they basically did is remove physical presence from the analysis. That South Dakota law, they blessed it, but it's still remanded back to the lower courts, and, technically could be deemed unconstitutional by the lower courts if they wanted to, but the courts pretty much blessed it, so it's probably going to be fine. I doubt it'll even be heard. I doubt it'll even be remanded. I mean, I'm sure Wayfair will drop the case at this point. It's I've never seen the court be that blunt, and I was a little disappointed too in the way that this came out, especially Ginsburg. I thought was really, really problematic. I was really disappointed, but I knew no argument that's how it was going to go.
Yeah, it was. The tea leaves were definitely reading towards, it's one thing to say, hey, the multi-billion-dollar companies are using this to their advantage. And it's a whole nother thing to go, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of merchants, across the U.S. and really across the world who will be impacted by these things. And in my reading of the case, South Dakota was quite disingenuous with their idea that, hey, it's $19 a month and you're done.
Yeah, right.
It's like, no, not done, not $19 a month. This is going to be a massive, massive compliance regulatory burden. The money is irrelevant, from the standpoint of collecting and remitting tax. It's not even our money as merchants anyway. It's the consumer's money. So that's not the issue. But so if you summarize the decision now, basically, or I'll try it and then you agree with me or clarify, but they basically said physical presence is no longer the core question. As something as simple as 200 sales in a state, 200 sales, you could sell, a $1 item 200 times, and you'll be now required to deal with taxes, or $100,000, whichever comes first. Is that basically how you saw it?
I think they sort of ran the scenario where they said $100,000 of sales with 200 transactions seems like you must have substantial, activity in the state to generate that. They don't really understand what it's like to be on Amazon, but at the same time, there's a lot about Amazon that's different than this case, right? And I thought what was telling to me, and I think, the court still left the door open. I mean, they didn't say it was the definite, this is definitely okay. They said it was definitely okay in the context of large companies and maybe okay with small businesses, but to challenge this law to say it's too burdensome as a small business, they said the door is still open to do that. This is not what they were asked to address. They were very, very narrow in what they decided, and basically just saying we're removing physical presence from the equation. You can still bring a burden case before us and say, listen, I'm a small business, I'm a kitchen table enterprise here, and now I've got to hire Deloitte and Touche to do my taxes on my kitchen table because I have nowhere else to put them. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, really, where is a small business? I always say, where is a small business going to get an accountant that, how is your Washington State local accountant going to understand the intricacies of Mississippi laws applied to an income tax LLC that's a pass-through, and the difference between, their income tax, that portion of their tax return on income, and their franchise tax, which is like a net worth tax. There's like different scenarios, and I don't know, how is your Washington State accountant going to know that? So who do you go to? But I thought this was interesting in page 23 when the court said that, they said they had this quantity of business, referring to the $100,000 200 transaction rule, could not have occurred unless the seller availed itself of substantial privilege of carrying business in South Dakota, and respondents are large national companies that undoubtedly maintain an extensive virtual presence. And I thought that was really key that they added that sentence there. They didn't have to. But I think that's, that was seriously like the point. It was like, this is ridiculous. Stop hiding behind this. And it makes sense, because if you listen to the oral argument, they could care less about Wayfair. They were always concerned about the small business. And I think what they said is, well, listen, the case that was brought, and this was my argument, is that this was really never about Wayfair. The case that was brought before us technically is Wayfair. And we think the idea of Wayfair hiding behind physical presence is really ridiculous. And we need to get rid of this ridiculous rule so Wayfair can't just hide behind physical presence, and neither can other big companies. But if a small business is truly being burdened, by these laws, then by all means bring that case before the courts. And if it makes it to the Supreme Court, they'll, maybe they'll take it. And if they believe that there's something to adjust there. But I think part of it was they just removed it. Let's see what happens. Maybe that will inspire Congress to take action, because obviously putting it there didn't inspire them. So maybe this is another way to get Congress to take action, to clarify. Not that that gives me any comfort.
Well, even as the Quill decision came down, as I recall, the court said unequivocally, hey, this shouldn't be our problem. This should be Congress's problem. You can fix all of this immediately, pass some laws that deal with this. And it's just sat there the entire time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly right. And that's what the Dormant Commerce Clause is. It's like, we're going to speak, but please, Congress, come in and address this. This is kind of really not our place to do this, because we're not supposed to legislate. We're not.
Yeah, but now we've got the guys questioning Zuckerberg to try to sort this out, and explaining to commingling FBA, and it seems like an uphill battle.
Lobbies convincing these people that they're merely this passive flea market online, and that you guys are all individual retailers. I mean, so that's why OMG needs to exist. It needs to be free of Amazon, free of eBay. We can't rely on the same e-commerce coalition that it would include an Amazon or include an eBay. And that's why our membership requirements really exclude those types of companies. I mean, we're very specific on what you have to be in order to be a member. You can sell on eBay, you can sell on Shopify, you can sell on anything you want online. Who knows, one day you could be maybe an Airbnb person, I don't know. But the point is, you can't be the big guy, because that's problematic. We can't have those types of people driving policy, because we have direct conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So we need to have our own voice and our own opinion, and be able to get that voice heard, and make sure people want to hear what we say. And that only happens if people adopt OMG and become members and really get into it.
So what does this mean then for merchants out there, that it's like, okay, now physical presence is not the deal. So does that mean I need to register in 45 states, or should I just capitulate when California sends me the 10th nastygram that says they're taking my kids and my pets and so forth? What does this mean?
Scott. Yeah, no, it's funny because somebody told me, they said Avalar, I knew Avalar had gone public a couple weeks ago, and that their stock went up 15% after this ruling. And I said to myself, why didn't I invest in them?
Yeah, boy, well, that was the one we could have saw coming.
Yeah, I forgot. I didn't even think about that. I mean, it's ridiculous because, these companies are going to go on and scare everybody and say, yeah, you need to register now, get compliant with 50 states. None of these, like the two biggies, like Taxstar and Avalar, don't do income tax compliance. And oftentimes the people who talk to me say they didn't even get warned about it. I know Taxstar has had articles on income tax in the past, but they don't really warn the people when they get kind of sucked into it that that's coming. And so people get surprised by all the sort of subsequent pain that comes with registering in these states. So, I'm against registering. I just think that you're opening yourself up to more pain that, most sellers I talk to can't afford it anyway. Like they realize, like, I can't afford all of this compliance. I can't afford to hire my own tax guy, full time. And again, it's, there's still a lot of questions that have to be answered. And that's why we need to bring our case in court. The case that says this is a burden on small businesses. This shouldn't be the burden on kitchen table enterprise, right? We have a solution. We have Amazon collecting the tax is a much more reasonable solution to this than making each individual small business, a marketplace merchant, collect the tax. So the burden doesn't make sense in this case, because as applied to us, there's a much more reasonable solution that would place no burden on us. So why not, and Amazon can charge for it. They already do, and they can be compensated for the effort that they have to go to do it for us. But it's just not really fair that we have to be put in a situation. But then we also have to address the income tax in that same case and say, okay, well, Amazon can do our sales tax, but they can't do our income tax. So what are we gonna do about that? And do the states need to get together and just come up with an easy solution for people who sell via marketplaces? Something needs to be done. It's not our fault the states are dysfunctional and can't work together and form a common solution. We shouldn't be forced to suffer. As I said in the brief, it's like, the states always kind of want, for the states, it's like, we're never going to adapt to innovation. We expect innovation to sort of adapt to us. In other words, you absorb us as a burden. We don't try to kind of, help further innovation by sort of adapting to the modern times. The states have done nothing since Quill, if you think about it. Really, all that stuff the court said was all crap to me, because the states have really done nothing. Mm-hmm. The state's definition of modernization is the fact that you can now file on a website as opposed to filling out a paper return. But that's like scanning the Encyclopedia Britannica, the paper books, putting them on an Adobe web thing and posting to the web and saying I've digitized the encyclopedia. It's such bullshit. Pardon my language.
No, it's quite appropriate. The reality is, like, they have done almost nothing. In fact, maybe less than nothing. The states don't have any intent, in my opinion. I don't see any intent of them trying to work together to solve the problem in a proactive way. And this goes back to the fact that there's so many hands in the cookie jar, right? Because Absolutely. It's not just the states, right? There's every little city's now going to say, oh, now how do I get my little piece of that? I've got the Tempe, Arizona says, hey, I need a registration fee. You sold a spatula in my city, so I'm going to need a $50 a year registration. The consequences are potentially unending. So there's just a lot to be done. So when you look at this, do you say, so first of all, maybe we should just clarify that the question of FBA creating Nexus is still separate from this in many ways.
Oh yeah, that's a point that I always make. Thank you. I kind of got sidetracked and forgot to say it. Yeah, it's funny how many FBA people come up to me and say, do I need to register now? It's like, well, why? You're not in any different a situation. You're still in dire straits. You were in dire straits before this case, because the states, in their opinion, thought you had a physical presence. So even if the court went the other way and said physical presence was no longer a factor, the states were still going to consider you to have already had physical presence prior to that, and you were already on the hook. You're already in the state. So for the FBA sellers, I mean, nothing's really changed other than, the urgency that was there before has just become more urgent because now we know that we need to take action because the states are going to be empowered to act and they're going to be more and more aggressive. And so we need to get people onto OMG. We need to, start the process of asserting your constitutional rights. At the same time, you need to start protecting yourself and buying yourself time and making sure you don't screw up something where you end up having to pay a bunch of tax, a bunch of tax in order to, and the only way you get it back is to pay it, and then you have to sue for a refund, and you're already in a bad spot. So you have to be mindful of that if you're being pursued by a state that there are ways to protect yourself, but you may not necessarily just want to start cooperating directly either. It's time to take action if you're an FBA because now we know what needs to be done. If you're non-FBA, welcome to the party, as you said before. You're now in a situation where a lot of us are, except non-FBA people and eBay people and Etsy may not have the income tax problem because they do have this law called Public Law 86272, which says you don't have to file income tax. The state can't make you pay or file income tax returns in that state if your only connection to the state is the sale of tangible personal property and you're selling it, but the orders are referred to home office at a state and then shipped in state. So somewhere in that sort of threshold of what you can do to avoid an income tax, I don't see FBA sellers as crossing that threshold. I mean, non-FBA sellers as crossing that threshold. So, you still may have a very expensive sales tax and tax registration compliance burden. Maybe it's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Who the hell knows what it's going to ultimately cost you when you factor in all the cities and states and towns and parishes. But you may not have that income tax burden unless the states start to get creative with you. But whereas the FBA sellers, because in the eyes of the states, you have a physical presence, they're going to say you're storing inventory in their state, and therefore you're subject to income tax.
And of course, this entire argument needs to be addressed at some point. Maybe this is something that the Online Merchants Guild will look at, but there's many reasons, in my opinion, that FBA still is not physical presence. It wasn't before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's but this is my interpretation. Again, Paul has his own opinions and expertise, but and actually he said as much. The states are now going to be empowered, right? They now are going to go, hey, now that the gloves are off, we can do anything we want and nobody can stop us. And I don't think that they will read the narrow, kind of, this is about the big companies picture. And so this is inevitable that there will be lots of state action against lots of people. And, we need to kind of gird ourselves for battle and set strategies, and then ultimately figure out what kind of case we can get in front of them to fight this thing. Because California, I think they're going to turn up the heat, not turn it down.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the people who are sending you threatening letters, I mean, they're not even qualified in what they do. I mean, this one person who's been harassing a lot of people, she just keeps turning it up and scaring you more and more. She was like a travel agent 6 months ago. I mean, you find her LinkedIn profile or her Facebook profile, like they don't know tax background. And I've spoken to a few of those people, and they're just like robots. I mean, they have a mission. They're told what they're supposed to do, and they're following orders. They're not doing, they don't think, they don't even understand the concept that there's legal question and legal opinion, and that that this is not, black and white. They see it as pure black and white, and they think you're all tax evaders. I mean, it's insane. And so they scare the crap out of people and get them to do things that they probably shouldn't be doing. That's that form, and sending it back, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, I don't know a lawyer who in state and local tax that knows what they're doing that would ever actually fill out that form. I mean, we might respond to it, but we're not going to fill it out and answer those questions in that way. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, their intent is just to get you into the system. It doesn't even matter what you put on the form. They're going to decide that,
what you say, that they've already concluded you have Nexus. The form is just to kind of like let you make admissions to this.
Yeah, this is exactly right. You're going to, in fact, I know one of my very good friends and colleagues, he's been harassed by them. He's been on the phone with them. And, at one point he's like, fine, I'm going to send you what you want. And then, he sees these questions. And he's like, well, the answer to this is no. And they're like, but I'm not sure I get the details right, but their system wouldn't take the actual correct answer. Yeah. And so he's like, well, what should I put here? Because that, it's not taking the correct answer. And it's like, well, just put in yes, essentially admitting things that aren't true. And, this is these people advising him to lie on a government forum. And it's just a crazy blind leading the blind scenario. I dislike it immensely.
I coach a lot of people through these, and I think they're very surprised to kind of, when we run through their business, when we run through the analysis and decide what we want to do, I think they're very surprised, like, to kind of find out, everyone's situation is a little different, but, it's not the approach that, we're not. The one thing I'll say is there's no brownie points here. Okay. You don't get extra credit for cooperation. Okay. This is not, Law and Order where, where they come up to you and say, yeah, you know what, you can go get a lawyer, or we can work together on this. And, they're going to screw you no matter what. I mean, this is it doesn't matter if you're cooperative. Some of my clients have been super cooperative. In fact, have helped the states understand the business to the point where they further, support their position that this is legitimate what they're doing. And it's like, and then they go even harder on that person. It's like, it's hilarious. I'm doing that in Washington right now.
Yeah,
it's such a bad situation. And people, it's why, it's like, you can defend yourself. You can go against California, face the back taxes, or you can support the OMG and, help us reach our goal. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire the kind of litigators we need. It doesn't go to me. It's like to hire lawyers and litigators to file these types of cases. These are complex cases. And we need to raise that kind of money to bring that case. But you know what? If you're facing that legal bill on your own, wouldn't you much rather share it with like tens of thousands of other people? So, we should be joining. We should be encouraging other people to join. I love the fact that you support us. I wish other people who are thought leaders and whatnot in the Amazon community would support us. So many feel threatened by us. It's very annoying. So many people we reach out to just seem to treat us like we're some threat to their business, when we're actually trying to save you guys. We're trying to save it. It's like, do you want to be a MySpace guru in a year when nobody can afford to do what you're doing, or do you want to continue to be able to offer your services and help people succeed? Our job, I can't tell your listeners how to succeed on Amazon. I don't know how to tell you to succeed. But that's not what we're here to do. We're just here to kind of keep that window of opportunity open for everybody to succeed, right? Like that's what we do. And so that when you learn what you need to learn, and you can apply it, that you actually can do it. So for people we're understanding as you are, and some of the other people I've spoken to.
Well, in some ways, this is just the maturity of the market. So, really, if we boil the fat off the bone, the Amazon marketplace really picked up steam in the last, say 4 to 6 years, in terms of, bringing in so many sellers and having so many people starting to achieve, real meaningful numbers. And that's a very nascent, part of the e-commerce business. And so the idea of, the Empower Cooperative, people are confused. Well, how can members own the cooperative, and what does that mean? And people are confused. Well, why would you need a trade association to, help lobby and help fight legal battles? It's a fairly unique thing. Whereas other industries, it's a known quantity. You talk about AARP, but any major trade business I've ever been in, construction, they have lobbying organizations, Master Builder Association.
The Association of Cheese Manufacturers.
Exactly.
And there's so many ridiculous ones that there's no reason why 2 million people with such a common interest and don't have a trade. It's actually shocking to me.
It is. Yeah, it is. Quite right. Well, but again, this is from kind of older experienced guys looking at a nascent business going, you guys are missing one of the basic elements. And, I'm here to share, with all the awesomers out there, and Paul's kind enough to come on and share as well, to say, hey, this is a solvable problem. There's going to be pain along the way, no doubt about that. But, by supporting, OMG, and there's also a marketing company called OMG. So I'll probably usually say Online Merchants Guild.
Yeah, we're the .org.
What's that?
We're .org, onlinemerchantsguild.org, right? Yeah.
Okay, good. Onlinemerchantsguild.org. Again, we'll have this stuff in the show notes, as well as how to be able to contact Paul directly. But these things are things that, when you're being threatened by a state, you should take action on some level, and at least know what the options are, and then make an educated choice from there. Any final words of wisdom, Paul? Because I know we've ran a little long, but it's such an important and complex topic. You know, we probably haven't given enough energy just yet.
No, I mean it's a hard thing. I mean, I struggle. I do prefer the opportunities where I can speak on it, because it's a little bit easier to get it all out, because you know there's just so many moving parts in this in this stuff. And it's like, you know, a lot of times, you know, where I struggle with this is, you know, as a corporate tax lawyer, when we talk at tax issues with big companies, we're talking to tax professionals, right? It's one tax professional, so there's already a sort of common ground that we have, so I don't have to explain everything from scratch. Whereas in this case, I have to explain things from scratch, but I actually have to do more, because I have to help people unlearn what they've been taught by tax jars and Avalara, and that this physical presence equals Nexus and therefore you're screwed mindset, because that's not true. And I always start off by saying, well, you know, prior to yesterday, that, you know, did you know that there's two types of Nexus? That there's Nexus under the Due Process Clause and there's Nexus under the Commerce Clause. And we still don't know if you have Nexus under the Commerce Clause because of FBA. I would suggest you don't. You didn't direct your activity towards the state, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, they don't even know that. And that's sometimes the wake-up call to say, guys, stop relying on what you think you know, and just, you know, let's start from scratch here. And it's hard to do that. So I always tend to be over the, you know, just more than maybe it seems is necessary. Maybe it's too much, because I just don't know where the listeners are coming from. But, you know, if you're, you know, same last words is going to be, if you're dealing with a state right now, definitely get help. You know, get help from people who tell you that you have a chance. Obviously, I do, not people who just say you're doomed and you have to pay, and try to get you on a payment plan to earn their money and leave. Realize that when a state tells you they want you to come in to comply, especially California, they oftentimes leave out the fact that they're going to come after you for back taxes. If you ask them, they usually do tell you, but a lot of people don't, and then they get the letter saying, okay, where was your back taxes for 10 years? So just realize that that's on the table too. If you have any questions, obviously reach out to me, but most importantly, join the Guild. And beyond just joining the Guild, I mean, we need help. I mean, we're a young organization. We just launched with this Wayfair brief in March. It was sort of a rushed launch because we needed to be up and running for that. But help us spread the gospel. If you have friends who are selling, get them on board. Tell them to tell their friends. I mean, let's just get this thing up and running and get people to adopt it. Because if you don't, I mean, if we fail in our mission, then I just don't know, you know, what happens next to this community. I mean, there's nobody looking out for them. So, you know, help us spread the word. And if there's anything you can help us with, like if you have, I don't know, time to help us with our social media marketing, we love volunteers. And but anything anyone can do, please reach out to me, paul@onlinemerchantsguild.org, and, you know, love to have you on board in some capacity.
Yeah, and just excellent, you know, advice and certainly sage wisdom. These are very important topics. I haven't said it clear enough here, but I want to just reinforce this. You know, Paul has been, for as long as I've been able to track him, a year and a half, I don't know, but a long time, he has been an advocate for the entrepreneur. He's been an advocate for the little guy without, you know, coming to each guy and going, hey, I'm not going to speak up I'm not going to speak the truth unless I have some skin in the game. He's doing a lot of this stuff on a volunteer basis. Now, that's not sustainable. We got to have a way, whether it's the Online Merchants Guild or using Paul's firm directly, to be able to take action and keep this kind of, you know, brain plugged into the system. And so I really appreciate everything you've done for entrepreneurs up until now. And I know that there will be a lot of support coming. And there's no doubt that there's ways that we can kind of increase this lobbying and lawsuit part of the equation. I have some ideas, and we'll talk about those offline. But very good job, and thank you for such amazing work on behalf of entrepreneurs around the world.
You bet. Thank you so much. I love these opportunities. It's just always great to meet new people and get involved in new groups and just talk about what's important. And no, I appreciate it. Thank you for thinking of me and for all your kind words.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesomers, we'll be back right after this.
Hey, Amazon Marketplace professionals, this is Parsimony ERP, and we get one question over and over. Can you please tell me exactly what Parsimony does? Well, we'll try, but this is only a 30-second spot, so we're going to have to hurry. Connect to your Seller Central account and pull all the new orders. Enter the orders with all customer data. Enter all of the Amazon fees and charges. Store them at the item level. Generate profit and loss reports at the SKU level. Automatically generate income statements. Handle multiple companies. Handle multiple brands. Handle multiple currencies. Facilitate budgets and forecasts. Store all customer interactions in a sophisticated CRM system. Manage your supply chain. Project and task management. Maintain an audit log. Hey, you get it. That's Parsimony, PARSIMONY.com. Parsimony.com. We've got that.
Well, I sure enjoyed our conversation with Paul today. I hope you did as well. This is, again, the Awesomers podcast number 3. You can go to awesomers.com/3 to see the show notes and related details that we may have talked about. And it is just so striking to me that, the states are acting in such a malicious, harassing, and from our perspective, meaning myself and others here at Awesomers, not speaking for Paul, but they're acting in an illegal way. They are going out of their way to oppress small businesses, particularly those that are not even in their own state, and they're doing so in a way that anybody else who acted like this would go absolutely to jail. They are doing everything possible they can do to harass, oppress, threaten, and otherwise push e-commerce guys into either the shadows or into some sort of fake compliance that is not even sustainable. Or even pushing them out of business. So let's not stand for this. Let's do something about it. And one of the ways you can do that is to go ahead and share this podcast. And don't forget to, leave a review and maybe, share this with a friend. Doesn't hurt. Sharing is caring. Well, we've done it again, everybody. We have another episode of the Awesomers podcast ready for the world. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you've enjoyed our program today. Now's a good time to take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. Heck, you could even leave a review if you wanted. Awesomers around you will appreciate your help. It's only with your participation and sharing that we'll be able to achieve our goals. Our success is literally in your hands. Thank you again for joining us. We are at your service. Find out more about me, Steve Simonson, our guest, team, and all the other Awesomers involved at awesomers.com. Thank you again.
Awesomers.com